Well, the reports have been out that the number of traffic incidents in the U.S. is on the rise and has been since throughout the pandemic. Ever since 2019 and onward, we've seen the number of traffic incidents as well as traffic deaths be on the rise across the U.S., including having an impact here in the state of Michigan. Joining us now to talk about that and what you can do to keep yourself safe on Michigan's roadways is First Lieutenant Mike Shaw, the Public Information Officer for the 2nd District of the Michigan State Police. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on to talk about this because it's an interesting situation, but it's also a really concerning situation that we're in, not just here in Michigan, but throughout the U.S. on our roadways. Since 2019, the number of traffic incidents has continued to rise, but even more concerning is the number of deadly car crashes has risen as well. According to a graphic presented by Fox News from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in 2019, the number of deadly car crashes, 27,019, and now in 2022, the full calendar year, 31,785. And you think about that, even the jump of about 1,000 between 2019 and 2020, when not as many people theoretically were on the road because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of factors that go into this. What are some of those factors that, at least here in the state of Michigan, that we've seen contribute to more incidents on the road and more deadly incidents among those?
So here in Michigan, we've seen the same thing as the national average has. And for us, about 1,100 in 2022 that are 2021, 1,100 fatalities in the state of Michigan. All of these fatalities are all preventable. They could, we kind of talk about gun violence a little bit and we talk about the loss of life, but think about it, 1,100 people in the state of Michigan that died on our roadways that if somebody would have done something different, it wouldn't have happened. So we need to kind of get back into that mentality. These are traffic crashes. These are, they're not accidents. Somebody did something that they shouldn't have done out there to cause these crashes as we see them out there. I like to call them the big three since I represent the Detroit area, and they're pretty simple. And it's excessive speed, following too closely, and driving distracted. If we could eliminate those three behaviors, we'd probably eliminate quite a few, if not all, of these preventable crashes.
And look, I said it already, we had less drivers out on the road during the COVID-19 pandemic. That has been statistically represented over the last couple of years, especially for the year 2020 and in 2021, as people were mostly at home, staying safe in the bulk of the pandemic. But there were still drivers out on the road, and as people came back onto the roadways and life returned to some semblance of normalcy, that did change the conditions once again. It didn't just hard reset to where we were at pre-pandemic. So how did the onset of those drivers going back onto the road with the pandemic drivers combine to create a more tense situation out there that has led to some of these deadly incidents?
So for us, and we're Michiganders, so we don't like to admit that we're not very good drivers. So I being the Motor City and all, we all like to think that we're all the best drivers. But some of the behaviors that our troopers saw pre-pandemic, it was starting during the pandemic, and then even after. When we're talking about excessive speed, we're not talking like a couple miles over the speed limit. Our troopers are regularly stopping people for exceeding the speed limit by going 110, 115. In our last campaign, our highest speed total was 142. Can you imagine 142 miles an hour driving with other drivers? So we saw a lot of the responsibility that drivers used to have that kind of lost it during the pandemic. And then we added other drivers out there as well that maybe hadn't gotten behind the wheel for a while. It's just, it's a recipe for disaster. That particular driving behavior in itself is just, it's just really driving the problems that we're seeing out there.
And those excessive speeds, it's basic physics. It's going to have a bigger impact if you're coming to a hard stop, whether it's yourself slamming on the brakes in a tough situation or colliding with something or someone else on the roadways. But even for those that are just a little ways over the speed limit, and some may operate under the mindset of it's just 5 or 10 miles per hour above the limit. What really could that do in a dangerous situation? But those speeds also have a significant impact on outcomes when there are accidents or there are incidents on our roadways.
And it does. And I think it's a combination of the two, right? So usually you get those 7 to 10 over, but they're also following too closely. And we've all seen them on the roadways, right? As you're driving along, somebody just either jams on the brake or they jam on the brake and dart off to the shoulder of the roadway because they couldn't stop in time to hit the one in front of them. You combine that with distracted driving, we even see those small fender benders that happen in rush hour traffic because somebody is driving, traffic is slow in rush hour, so you kind of slow down in front, and then naturally everybody's like this, right, looking at your phones and doing everything else. And as soon as you kind of see traffic going forward, you kind of hit the gas and then realize it hasn't, and then boom, you run into the person in front of you. So a lot of those things that we're looking at, those combination of behaviors with that excessive speed, with that distracted driving, is what's causing all of our crashes out there. There's not anything really accidental about it. There's always somebody did something, and usually it's both drivers that are involved in these crashes that did something to kind of lead to it.
Joining us on the Megacast is First Lieutenant Mike Shaw, the 2nd District of the Michigan State Police Public Information Officer, with us talking about the increase in U.S. traffic deaths over the last couple of years and throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, leading all the way back to 2020 from a rise in 2019. And it's been said in other states across the union. In fact, in the article I was referencing earlier, Chelsea Hodgson, a patrol sergeant for the Washington State Police, had also mentioned that staffing comes into play too on the patrolling side to try to address some of these issues. So we know that the Michigan State Police hasn't been immune to some of the staffing issues that we've seen in other agencies here statewide as well as across the United States, but nonetheless, it's still out there patrolling our roads, making sure that our roadways are as safe as possible. But how does that factor into addressing some of these issues, that need for staff to really address these problem behaviors amongst drivers, including the education side of things?
And that's really what we're keying on now. This is the educational part, right? When we sit down here, we talk about these issues. But there also has to be an enforcement angle too, because I used to say some people, you go up there and talk to them and say, hey, the reason I stopped you today is your speed. I clocked you at 85 and a 70. Any reason why you're going so fast today? Nope, just not paying attention. Okay, be careful out there, slow it down. And usually that's enough. But some people, they need it written down for them sometimes and need to go through the court process to really understand that their driving behaviors aren't safe for themselves, their families, or others. So it's got to be a combination of the two of why we're doing it, because we get a little pushback, right? Well, don't you guys have anything better to do than go out there and do traffic enforcement? And they're right, we do. We have a lot of things we could do. We'd be solving violent crimes, we could be patrolling our townships, stuff like that. But unfortunately, 11,000 people died on Michigan roads. So no, we have to take care of that issue as well, as long as all the other stuff that we could do. So if drivers would help us out by using those great driving behaviors that we're talking about, driving the speed limit, opening up that distance between you and the car in front of you and not watching Netflix while you're driving, that would lead us to be able to do something different.
Yeah, a lot of what can be done to reduce the number of traffic deaths here in the state of Michigan and across the union comes down to individual drivers and also to that education angle, as you talked about from the state police. Lieutenant Shaw, at the state police level, of course, most of your patrol on the roadways is on our highways, but also you're partnering with local law enforcement agencies as well to provide some assistance. But in terms of what the state police is saying to these local agencies, what can they be doing better, or could they be focusing on better yet to help reduce some of these incidents in their local area as we're trying to address these area by area in the state of Michigan?
So we work great with our local and our county partners. So we through our Office of Highway Safety Planning, there's grants available for speed enforcement, different enforcement campaigns to go through there. So it is a group effort across the state. So in different parts of the state, depending on where you are, we may be the only law enforcement agency around, especially when you get up to the UP. And like you talked about with staffing, there were some staffing issues. There were some departments that during COVID decided they weren't going to do as much traffic enforcement as they did before, just for the fact of not wanting to interact with people or put their people in those positions. So I think a lot of people took advantage of that as well with their excessive speeding. Was, hey, maybe the cops aren't out there as much as they used to be. So, going a little bit faster isn't going to really hurt anybody. When we found out, then yeah, actually it is. It was causing a lot more fatalities out there because, our cars are great. I mean, the automakers make very safe cars compared to where they used to be. But if you're going that fast and you hit somebody, like you said before, physics is physics, and you're not going to survive those type of crashes.
We're joined on today's program by First Lieutenant Mike Shaw, the Public Information Officer for the 2nd District of the Michigan State Police, which includes oversight here in the Oakland County area. Lieutenant Shaw, just another minute or so before we'll have to say goodbye and move on for today. Anything else or any lasting advice or words of wisdom for those out on our roadways in Oakland County and here in this area of Michigan?
So there's a couple of things that you can do to avoid those. I always tell people that you can't leave home at 8 o'clock if you got to be to work at 7:45. So you got to kind of plan ahead, right? You got to leave early, leave yourself that extra time, so that way you don't have to drive that excessive speed to make it to work. My dad always used to say, work was there before you were born. It's going to be there while you live, and it's going to be there long after you're dead. So we need to kind of think about where we're going from A to B. That's all we're doing. It's not personal. It's just a route to go from A to B, from one spot to the other. It's not NASCAR. We're not getting paid to go out there. Rubbing isn't racing or anything like that on the freeway system, or even on our secondary roads, because these problems are everywhere. It's just taking your time, being nice, be polite, drive the speed limit, give that extra distance, and if somebody kind of cuts in front of you because of that, give them a wave and not worry about it. So it's kind of that driver behavior. I always say the biggest cause of traffic crashes is that person that looks in you in that rear view mirror. So that's us. That's our personal responsibility to be a better driver.
Lieutenant Shaw, appreciate your time and appreciate your insight today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.